Hello everyone, I'm Annabelle Tuggle. Thank you so much for joining us for East Texas in Focus. Let's get started. All right, tonight we're focusing on what voters need to know before heading to the polls. Today we'll be discussing the differences between election cycles, transparency concerning how votes are counted, important dates to remember, and the steps you need to take to make sure your voice is heard. That's why we're bringing in Michelle Allcon, the elections administrator for Smith County. How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. First, I want to start off, just tell us about your position, about what you do, and why it's important for Smith County.
Well, I am the elections administrator for Smith County, which is an appointed position that runs all of the elections within Smith County. All the political subdivisions contract with our office, the cities and schools, the volunteer emergency service districts. All of them contract with me to conduct their elections for them. So I have the knowledge and the manpower, we have the equipment. It's easier for them to come through us than it is to try to hold those elections for themselves. Know all of those timelines that they have to meet, all of that. My office also handles voter registration. So if voters or potential voters are wanting to be registered to be able to vote in an election, that all comes through my office as well.
Got it. Fun fact, she was just telling me off camera that there's not an elections administrator for every county. So this is not really unique, but it's something that could be different for Smith County than other places.
That is true. There are some counties in Texas where the county clerk's office runs the actual conducting of elections, and the voter registration office handles the tax office handles voter registration. And then there are, that is the original setup, the division of labor. And then at some point in time, an elections administration office was created and made into law where a county could choose to combine those two aspects into all one office. It streamlines a lot of things. The county clerk's office and the tax assessor's office already handle so much to do with the county that bringing those two items, conducting elections and voter registration, out, it really helps. It's beneficial for the voters because they have a one-stop shop. They don't have to go to two different offices. It also helps those elected officials who run those offices be able to focus on other items that are important.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, let's get into what our viewers need to know. Let's start out with, we have the March primaries coming up. What's the difference between the March, May, and November elections?
All right, so the March primary it's an elimination race. So the Democratic Party and the Republican Party of Texas are putting candidates are applying for places on the ballot, and the primary allows voters to make a determination of which of those candidates they want to see on the November ballot against the other party's candidates. So it's essentially an elimination race. The May election, there's actually two, so I need to, which one are you referring to?
Both of them.
Okay.
Which one?
So we have, every first Saturday in May, you have, it's called a uniform election date. A lot of cities and schools have elections for their school board, city council, things like that. So there's those elections, which are specific to those. You can also have groups that will have special elections at that time. And then you have your runoff at the end of May. So on the years that you do have a primary election, some races will end in a runoff and or will be required to have a runoff to get the ballot down to one candidate for that party. So that's what the runoff is for. And then November is what we call a general election for state and county officers. It is the election where the voters will vote over the specific race, all the different candidates from the different political parties or the independent candidates, and choose who they want in that office.
Absolutely. So you have a lot of information you kind of have to juggle. Right now, are you just focused on March, or are you already thinking way ahead?
No, we're already thinking ahead. I have already done a lot of the preparatory work for the May City School elections.
Wow.
Candidates filing for places on that ballot, that deadline is actually tomorrow. So there's a lot of things that are happening for that. We can't really plan for the primary yet because we have to, or the primary runoff yet, because we have to see how the primary goes and what races will end up on that ballot before we can really plan anything there. But we are, of course, already planning for the November when we might conduct training for our workers, which polling places we can use, making sure that everything is scheduled ahead of time for that. So there's a lot of work going into November already at this moment.
Wow, that's awesome. Thinking ahead. All right, so for March or for any of these elections, what do people need to bring when they show up to vote? She has her props here.
I thought you might ask that. So all a registered voter for Smith County needs to bring is their photo ID. There are 7 acceptable forms of photo IDs. These are posted at every one of our polling places. This is also on our website. It's on the state's website. I think it actually says down here, votetexas.gov. 4 of the IDs on here are issued by DPS. The other 3 are not. So if you're a voter who's moved here from out of state, please check this to see if you have any of these IDs yet. We want to make sure that you know what you need when you come in.
Absolutely. That's easy enough. All right. So let's talk about transparency now. I know this is something that's really important for residents. How are these votes counted and how can they be trusted?
All right. So when a voter checks in, they're issued what we call a paper ballot card. They take that card to a ballot marking device, the Express Vote. They place that card into the Express Vote, and that pulls up their ballot and allows them to select their candidates for whatever office. At the end of the ballot, they can print that card and they can see all the selections they made. If there's something on there, they're like, oh, wait, I really wanted John Doe on there. I must have hit that button wrong. They can actually get a new ballot card. They don't have to cast it with the information incorrect on there. But once they put that ballot in the ballot box, it's a done deal. So make sure you ask that question before. Look over that card before you cast it. The ballot box is what we call a DS200. It is a tabulating device that tabulates and scans the ballot that you put into it. It also keeps that paper ballot card. So that is how we tabulate the results of the election. We collect those media devices that are in that DS200 and we run those through a computer that is not connected to any type of internet at the end of the night. After an election, we actually have a post-election audit that we conduct every election. It's not just for big elections, it's for every single one, where we do a hand count of up to 3 races, 3 precincts or polling places. Absentee, early votes, and election day votes are all part of this audit process. And I have a group of poll workers that comes in. It's not handled by my office. It's not handled by candidates. It's not handled by parties. And these poll workers come in and they will hand count these ballots and compare it against the electronic results. So that's the major thing. They always match. We never have any issues with that. We also provide, we do a public test of the equipment every election before an election. We actually held this test yesterday. We publish it in the paper so that if anybody wants to come, they can. And in that one, we have a test deck. It's not ballots that people cast because the election hasn't started yet. But it is a test deck that I have created and I've done a hand tally on. And I also provide tally sheets so that anybody coming in could do their own tally to verify that I've tallied it correctly. We run those ballots through those same machines and we run the reports from them and we tabulate using those USBs and we compare them all. They're in, so anybody can come and watch this and they can see that the hand count and the tally all match.
Absolutely.
So that's before the election even starts. We make sure that it works before we even open the polls.
Wow, that's awesome. So it sounds like it can be trusted. All right, well, that's a good start for now. We're going to take a quick break. When we return with East Texas in Focus, we'll have more with Michelle. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. We're focusing on what voters need to know before heading to the polls. It's that time again. We have some important days ahead of us where East Texans will have their voices heard. And as we pick new leaders for our neighborhoods, local cities, and the country, tonight we're opening up the East Texas Voters Guide. And we're here with Michelle. Let's get back into it. The elections administrator for Smith County. Michelle, let's just talk about where we can find out if residents are signed up to vote or not.
There's a couple different options for for voters or potential voters to check into that. The easiest, if you're doing this from home and you have internet access, votetexas.gov. Votetexas.gov will let you check if you are registered and what county you're registered in. So say you moved here from another county and you don't know if you changed your registration to Smith County or not, that will tell you which county in Texas you're registered in. So that's helpful for some individuals. You can also always just call our office and ask and we can look it up.
Absolutely, easy enough. All right, well, what if you're a little last minute and you haven't signed up to vote yet? I mean, it's too late for March, correct? But there's other elections in the future, so how can you do that?
Okay, so yes and no. That's an answer a lot of times with elections. The cutoff for registration for the primary was March the 5th. However, if somebody has recently moved to Smith County and they're registered in another county in Texas, and they are now residing in Smith County, they can still vote here during early voting only at my office. So it's a limited ballot that only allows the voter to vote over the races that are the same between their old county of residence and their new county, Smith County, but they still get to vote. That also changes their registration for them. So that is really important. We want to make sure that voters know that if they've moved here recently, we want them to still know that they can come in and vote, but they can only do it at my office during early voting.
Got it. So it's not necessarily too late for everybody, just probably the majority of people as far as March.
Yes, if they haven't registered at all, then yes, that is too late. And if you show up on election day and you're not registered in Smith County, unfortunately, you can't vote in Smith County.
Got it. What about for in the future elections?
So in the future elections, you can request an application from my office and we'll mail it to you. You can stop by my office to fill it out. Public locations such as libraries have applications. Schools typically have the applications for their graduating students, those who hit 18, college campuses. You can also get the application from our website. You can fill it out on our website. You cannot, you have to print it off, sign it, and then mail it in to us. It's not an online submission. You can also go through DPS. So if you're updating or changing your address through DPS, you can, there's a question they ask if you want to register to vote or change your registration. You just say yes to that question and they will send us the information and that will register you.
All right, well, once you're registered and once it's time to actually go vote, we could have a list out of the different locations, but are residents able to just go to any location or do they have to go the one closest to where they live? Convenience, how does that work?
So we are a county-wide polling place county, which means that any voter on election day can go to any of the polling places that are open in Smith County. We have, for early voting, we actually have 6 polling places open this election. The different dates and times, all of those locations are on our website. They will also be posted at each of the polling places. For election day, you can go to any of them as well, just like you could during early voting. There are 38 of them. So those locations, again, are listed on our website. We even have a map that you can use if visuals work better for you than just a straight list. So you could see which location worked better for you, whether it's closer to your home or closer to your work, or maybe just in between, you drive between Lindale and Tyler. We have a new location in Swan. You could actually stop and vote in Swan this election. So that entire list is on our website, and please do refer to it. There's a lot of locations you can choose from.
That's awesome. Just out of curiosity, how are locations chosen?
Okay, so that's a bit of a complicated question. So it's based on, there are a couple different factors involved. First of all, we take into consideration the number of election precincts we have in Smith County. You have to have a minimum of 50% of the number of election precincts you have for polling places.
Sounds complicated.
It is. Okay, so easy. If you have 10 election day precincts, you have to have a minimum of 5 polling places.
Okay,
so that's the easy way to say it. We have 75 election day precincts, so we have 38 polling places.
Got it.
Where those places are placed, we have to make sure that they are that no voter has to travel more than 25 miles from their home to the polling place. We also look for places that are handicap accessible. We try to look for places that are easy access to get on into and out of, good parking. We also have to take into consideration the precincts that are majority Republican or majority Democratic.
Right.
And so there are factors involved there. We're 79% Republican, 21% Democratic. So that percentage has to carry over to our polling places and where we locate those polling places.
Interesting. Things you don't think about.
Yeah, and then you have to look into how many polling place per election or per commissioner precinct you have.
Right.
So there's a lot of different factors involved in that.
Okay, that's why we leave it up to you guys. That's why we
yeah, that's why they hire me, right?
Yes. Okay, now speaking of that, as far as the staff, whenever it comes to the elections, do you take volunteers or how does that work?
So our poll workers are, for the most part, the person in charge of each location is determined by the party. The Democratic and Republican parties submit a list of workers to us every summer. Those are the individuals that are in charge of the polling locations. They get to choose who they work with within reason. If they can't find somebody to work with, that's when we help them out. We also have people that come into our office and request, hey, I want to work the polls, how do I get involved? So we have an application that they can fill out, and we keep a copy of that application for ourselves, and we send it to the individual parties if they put a party on that application. You also have the option when you're filling out a voter registration application to mark if you're interested in working as a poll worker.
Okay.
Some of our workers are volunteers, but most of them do get paid. We set them up as county employees, temporary employees. It's not a big paycheck, but it does help a little bit, especially in November, right before Christmas. We pay $11 for our clerks and $12 for our judges. So.
Okay. Awesome. Okay, let's talk about sample ballots now. Tell people kind of what they are and where they can find them, what they're useful for.
Okay, so a sample ballot is the ballot that will tell you, or it's a sample ballot. It tells you what you're going to see on your ballot when you get to your polling place. We have sample ballots for all of our election precincts, both Democratic and Republican sample ballots on our website. So we have a current election page. People can just go to that and go to the sample ballot section, and they can look up whichever precinct they want, whichever party they want. We also have something called a publication sample ballot. That gives, we have one for Democrats, one for Republicans. It gives every race for that party that is eligible in Smith County. So obviously, you're not going to get every constable on your ballot. That's going to be based on where you reside, but the publication sample ballot does show those. So we have a couple different types of sample ballots.
And so then you can be prepared ahead of time.
Correct. You can look into who's running. You can look into their what they stand for, how they voted on things in the past, if they have, like in court, for instance, with our commissioner's court. You can print out a copy of those sample ballots and actually mark who you're wanting so that you have that information. Take that piece of paper into the polling place with you. We also provide copies in our office, and we'll mail them out if somebody requests them.
Great. It's good to be prepared. All right, when we return, we're going to hear your thoughts as we open up the In Focus inbox after the break, so don't go anywhere. Welcome back, everyone. It's that time of the show where we hear from you, our viewers, from our In Focus inbox. Let's get to the first question. This one was sent in by William Meyer saying, is voting by mail still a thing in Texas? If so, who are they available to and how do you get started? I'm sure you have all the answers for this one.
This is a frequently asked question. Yes, voting by mail is still a thing. However, you do have to submit an application at a minimum once a year. It's not something you can just sign up for and be on the list forever. Voting by mail is available in Texas for individuals who are over 65, are disabled, are expected to give birth within 3 weeks of election day, or before or after. Those who are expected to be out of the county during early voting and on election day, and those who are confined in jail without a final conviction. So those are the reasons you could submit an application for a ballot by mail and actually get one. The application process itself, we have the applications on our website. An individual can request them from our office or pick them up from our office. I know that sometimes the parties will also send out applications. Sometimes candidates will. Usually they send them out to the group that, that 65 or older group. But once you submit that application to us, the due date for the primary for our office to receive those applications is this coming Friday, February the 23rd. So after early voting starts is when we can start, the due date for those applications. Once we receive those applications, we mail you a ballot, as long as you filled out the application correctly. Those ballots are then due back in our office on election day. You can hand deliver them on election day only to my office, or you can mail them at any time after you receive that ballot. We can, if the post office or another mail carrier delivers ballots to us the day after election day, as long as that ballot is postmarked by 7 p.m. on election day, we can still count that as well.
Okay, awesome. So it's not just anybody can do mail-in. There are certain stipulations. And so,
that is correct, yes.
So make sure you're following those guidelines. All right, let's get to our next question. This one was sent in by Jerry Browning saying, what's the most frustrating thing about working in an election office? This is a harder question, okay?
Yeah. It really depends on the election and what year. So for this year, one of the things that's frustrating is that some of our election workers have had to cancel. So we schedule people to work and then they've had to drop out. And so us having to reschedule, making sure that we have all of our locations on election day fully staffed, that can actually be extremely frustrating, especially as we get closer to election day. We have had in the past where people haven't shown up on election day to work and they hadn't given us any warning whatsoever. So that's probably one of the most frustrating things about working in an election office, is that you have to coordinate with all of these moving pieces, and sometimes the communication with the workers is not as clear cut as you would hope.
Right, and it seems difficult, just the amount of knowledge that you have to know. I'm just talking about this now, there's a lot of moving parts. And so how is that, trying to make sure everyone's on the same page with so many moving parts?
For the most part, from the time I get into the office until even after I get home, I'm constantly answering questions, texts, emails, phone calls. I'm good at multitasking, so for me, it's not frustrating that aspect is not frustrating. I can coordinate, I'm able to give somebody a task and really take my hands out of it, which I have to do. The county is too large for me to handle it all on my own. But it does require a lot of juggling, and it requires you to have good staff. Whether it's my full-time staff or the temporary election staff. I also have temporary workers that come in leading up to an election and after to help us with all of the supplies, all the forms, processing things after an election. So having good people who are willing to help is
helpful.
Yes, it's helpful. It's the opposite of it balances out the frustration.
All right, well, when we come back, we're going to have final thoughts from Michelle. All right, Michelle, any final thoughts?
There's so much involved in elections. Just if you have questions, go to our website or give our office a call.
All right, y'all have a good weekend.